In 2018, in a small, peaceful town in Georgia, the facade of a perfect family suddenly collapses, followed by tragic deaths. Ella Thompson, a beautiful young woman with a seemingly happy family, falls into a forbidden relationship with her stepfather, a respected pastor. Beneath the pastor's mask of morality and calmness lies a disgusting secret. When these dark secrets are exposed, the peaceful Thompson-Foster family becomes a terrible tragedy. The big question is what really happened behind closed doors. And how did an ideal family turn into an inescapable nightmare? Ella Thompson, a beautiful 18-year-old girl. She grew up in the love of her mother, Helen. Everything was perfect, but she always felt something was missing that she could not describe. A feeling of loneliness, lost in her own home. This feeling gradually turned into an insecurity, causing her to seek comfort in a place she should not have sought. Helen Foster is an elegant and intelligent woman. She always appears with a gentle smile on her lips, takes care of her family, and actively participates in the social activities of the town. After her husband died, she decided to remarry a man named James, a man with special charisma and respect in the community. He is the pastor of the town church, the person everyone looks to when they need advice, spiritual comfort. James always appears calm, warm, and is the ideal model of a husband and father. Since James came into Ella's life, her sense of loneliness has become more pronounced than ever. Although the Thompson-Foster family home is always filled with light and cheerful colors, James' presence has unintentionally created an invisible wall between Ella and the family members. Ella often sits alone in the corner of the room, looking out the window at the green barley fields, where the dim afternoon light seems to blend with her loneliness. Despite the cozy evenings at the dinner table with her mother and James, she still feels like an outsider. Family conversations often revolve around James and his activities in the community, leaving Ella feeling forgotten in the middle of those stories. When Helen and James were together in the town's social activities, Ella often found herself sitting alone in the house, listening to distant sounds but unable to feel a connection. On evenings when her mother and James returned home late, Ella felt like a lonely shadow in the large room, where the light from the table lamp could not dispel the darkness in her mind. James, though kind and caring, always created an invisible distance that made Ella feel like she no longer had a place in the family she once loved and felt a part of. She noticed a change in her mother's eyes. Her attention seemed to be divided between household duties and caring for James. The warmth of the home seemed to have faded, replaced by a cold and unfamiliar atmosphere. As each day passed, Ella felt more and more lost in her own home. She tried to find little things to make herself feel valued and important, but those efforts only seemed to highlight the emptiness inside her. Ella's loneliness was not just a young person's sadness, but also a feeling of being lost in the very space where she should feel safe and loved. On a cold autumn night, when the Adams-Clark house was quiet, Ella felt her loneliness reach its peak. The mixed emotions and sadness she had accumulated inside her became an unbearable burden. Although the house was warmly decorated and seemed full of happiness, Ella no longer felt like she belonged there. With determination and patience that had been accumulated for a long time, Ella decided to go to James's office. She moved gently through the dark hallway, each step revealing the anxiety and restlessness in her heart. When she opened the door to James's office, the dim light from the desk lamp seemed to highlight the tired lines on his face. James was sitting at the desk, engrossed in papers and documents. Ella quietly walked in and sat down next to James, not needing to say anything. She just needed her presence to share her feelings. James didn't need to ask, because the understanding in his eyes spoke for itself. He simply sat next to her, reached out to gently pat her, and created a space of comfort. James' presence and empathy made Ella feel a wave of warmth filling her heart. She realized that words were not necessary. James' sense of security and closeness was enough to ease the pain and loneliness she felt. This feeling was not just comfort, but also a deep connection that she had never experienced. Gradually, the empathy and affection between Ella and James blossomed. The evenings they spent together, sharing stories and confidences, helped Ella feel loved and understood. Their relationship gradually became closer, developing into a deep emotional connection. Not just familial affection, but also a closeness that was full of affection between two people. Ella no longer felt like a shadow in her home. Instead, she felt like she had found a part of her heart that she had never known before. In the quiet of the autumn nights, Ella and James developed a deep secret relationship. The secret nights together were not only moments of sharing comfort, but also passionate hours, when they let their emotions lead them and forgot everything around them. Each time they were together, the connection and emotions between them became stronger, and the secret nights gradually became an indispensable part of Ella's life. One night, when the rain fell heavily and created a steady tapping sound on the roof, Ella felt her sadness and loneliness reach an unbearable level. James, noticing the pain in Ella's eyes, led her to his study in the house. In the dim space with the weak light from the table lamp, the closeness between them became denser. Tight hugs, hasty kisses, and intimate exchanges made them unable to control their emotions. These moments are not just an escape from loneliness, but also a search for connection and comfort in each other's arms. However, the secrecy of this relationship not only left strong emotions, but also gave rise to feelings of guilt and anxiety. Ella always felt uneasy when thinking about her mother and the community discovering her relationship with James. Every time they met, they had to be sneaky, trying to avoid leaving any traces. This anxiety often haunted Ella, making her feel like she was living in a world of secrets and lies. One night, when Bella and James were together in the study, a sudden knock on the door startled them. James hurriedly hid Ella in a dark corner and opened the door with a worried look. Helen walked in with a tired and searching look, causing James to face the stress of hiding. Ella stood silently in the dark, feeling her heart beat fast and afraid of being discovered. However, after that night, James and Ella's feelings gradually became intense and could not be hidden. They not only met in the house but also found other unexpected places. James found a way to secretly bring Ella to the church at quiet times. Every week, when the church was quiet after the services, James often opened the door for Ella, and together they sought intimate moments in the sacred space of the place of worship. Once, when the light from the church windows shone on the wooden pews, Ella and James sneaked into the pastor's room, a place often used to prepare for services and meetings. In the small room, illuminated by the dim rays of light, they could no longer hold back. James locked the door, and the closeness between them became irrepressible. They shared passionate hugs, passionate kisses, and physical intimacy in a space that should have been sacred and pure. These clandestine encounters not only took place in closed rooms, but also created tormenting emotions in Ella's mind. She found herself sinking deeper and deeper into this relationship, and the feeling of comfort from James made her gradually lose herself in the feeling of being lost and the secrets that were growing thicker. One autumn morning, when the first rays of sunlight shone through the bedroom window, Ella felt a worrying difference in her body. She felt more tired than usual and noticed a delay in her menstrual cycle. The anxiety in her heart increased, and she decided to take a pregnancy test to confirm her suspicions. When the test results showed 2 clear lines, Ella felt like her heart was being squeezed in a strong wave of emotions. She was not only worried about James's reaction, but also afraid of the future and the consequences of the incident. She knew that finding out she was pregnant would not only affect her relationship with James, but also the stability of her family. While Ella and James were in a state of confusion, trying to find a way to solve their problems, they were completely unaware that Helen, Ella's mother, had long since discovered all the secrets. Helen, with her keen and sharp eyes, had long suspected the relationship between Ella and James. Her suspicions began with the small signs she noticed in the daily routine of her daughter and her new husband. She noticed that their secret rendezvous often took place at times when the church was empty or when everyone was asleep. Helen secretly observed and recorded the times and locations of these meetings, and from there she devised a plan to deal with what she had discovered. As the truth gradually emerged, Helen was ready to put her plan into action, unaware that it would lead to a chain of events that would be unimaginably devastating. Helen secretly followed Ella and James, regularly checking their schedules to confirm her suspicions. She used the social gatherings and charity events she attended to gain access and gather information. Her trips to the church were not always related to religious work, but were also opportunities for her to observe James while he worked or prepared for services. Realizing that simply watching and taking notes was not enough, Helen began to devise detailed plans to protect the family's honor and consolidate her control. She installed tiny surveillance devices in the church without James's knowledge, allowing her to monitor James' every move as he worked. These devices not only helped her know the time and place of their meetings, but also recorded their conversations and behavior. One day, while checking the recordings from the surveillance device, Helen discovered a surprising detail. James and Ella not only had secret meetings in the church, but also had intimate acts in the parsonage, which James had tried to turn into a secret shelter for their relationship. Helen felt guilt and betrayal spreading in her heart, and decided to take action to protect her family. Helen, filled with resentment and cruelty, began to plan to deal with both of them. She decided to use the information she had gathered to set up a situation where Ella and James could not escape exposure. As winter approaches, the cold and snowstorms envelop the Thompson-Foster house, and the atmosphere in the family becomes heavier than ever. Helen prepares for the fateful meeting she has planned for a long time. She invites Bella and James to church on a cold winter night, under the pretext of an important family discussion. When Bella and James arrive at the church, they have no idea that this will be a fateful night. The church, once solemn and quiet, now becomes the scene of a tense confrontation. Helen, with a cold and determined gaze, arranges everything to expose the secret of the two. As the conversation began, Helen pulled out the undeniable evidence videos and photos from the surveillance equipment she had secretly installed. The secret footage, the secret meetings between Ella and James were clearly displayed before them, leaving no room for any explanation. The atmosphere in the room became heavy and tense. Each passing moment was like a huge shock to them. Faced with the undeniable evidence, Ella felt like her world was collapsing. She could no longer hide the truth about her relationship and her condition. This admission, although unspoken, was clearly understood through her expression and attitude when she revealed the truth that she was pregnant with James. The shock and pain from this discovery was like a strong shock to Helen, causing her to collapse completely. In a fit of rage, Helen could not contain her anger. She pulled out the knife she had prepared long ago and brutally attacked James in the church, which had once been their refuge. The scene was brutal and bloody in the sacred space, as James was brutally attacked and fell. Pain and fear filled the air, creating a chaotic and deadly picture. Ella, witnessing the death of the man she loved, fell into a state of shock and panic. Her body seemed unable to bear it. The shock and pain led to a severe pregnancy shock, causing her to suffer an immediate miscarriage. The pent-up physical and mental pain created an unimaginable nightmare. When it was all over, Helen acted with unimaginable cruelty, leaving behind a scene of chaos and pain. She quickly left the church in the snowstorm, leaving everything behind to escape the consequences of her actions. In the brutality of that night, all that remained was a tragic tale of betrayal, pain, and irrevocable loss. As the sounds of chaos and Ella's screams echoed in the church, Helen rushed out in a panic. She drove away from the scene quickly, leaving everything behind. The traces of her crime were not hidden, and the chaos immediately attracted the attention of security and police officers. When the police received a report of the incident from emergency sources, they immediately deployed a search team. Patrol officers, with flashing lights and sirens blaring, quickly arrived at the scene. At the church, they found Ella in a state of panic, along with James's body and other heartbreaking evidence. The paramedics rushed Ella to the emergency room, but her injuries were too severe. Meanwhile, Helen, cunning and ready to face any consequences, immediately fled the town. In the following weeks, the pursuit of Helen became a public event. The press widely reported on the case, and the manhunt became a hot topic in the media. The authorities were relentless in their efforts to find her traces. They used every means available, from police investigation teams, drones, to specialized task forces. Clues from witnesses, security cameras, and traces left behind guided the search. A month later, the police discovered several important clues. Helen, who had left the area by changing cars several times and hiding in remote areas, was finally trapped in an area near a small village. She tried to find shelter in an abandoned house, deep in the woods, where she thought she could avoid being hunted down. As the police tracked Helen down, they found traces of her in the abandoned house. Investigators discovered traces of a makeshift life and signs that she had been there for some time. By combining clues from surveillance cameras and reports from local residents, they pinpointed her exact location. On a dark and cold night, the police raided the abandoned house and found Helen sitting in a corner, exhausted and desperate. She was arrested without a fight, apparently aware that any chance of escape had disappeared. Helen's testimony, as she was subjected to judicial measures, revealed her entire plan and motive. Helen was taken to prison, where she faced charges of murder and other serious crimes. The case not only shocked the town, but became a classic case of domestic cruelty and pain. Ella, recovering from her critical condition, is left to deal with immense grief and loss. She becomes a key witness in the case and must live with the trauma of James's death and her mother's betrayal. The Thompson-Foster family's life, already filled with lies and secrets, is now completely shattered. Their dark secrets are exposed, and each character in the story must face the consequences of their actions in a painful and tragic picture.